Good morning and welcome to Reading the Gospels Together for Easter Monday. We're going back into Matthew chapter 28 to see what happened immediately after the resurrection. First, there are 3 points I want to highlight today. And first of all, the point about Jesus going to Galilee. The Bible makes quite a deal about this. When the women go to the tomb, the angels say to them, "Go quickly and tell his disciples, he's risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him." Then the women meet Jesus on the road, and Jesus says to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." And then later on at the Great Commission in chapter 28, verse 16, we read, "Then the 11 disciples," notice there are only 11 now, there's no Judas anymore, "the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go." Galilee again and again. Now we know that eventually the disciples make their way back to Jerusalem, certainly in time for the Feast of Pentecost, which we read about at Acts chapter 2. But why Galilee? Well, remember, Galilee is really where the ministry of Jesus began, where he began preaching. And it was his home base in Capernaum for a number of years, staying with Peter and Andrew at Peter's mother-in-law's home. This became a place of Christian pilgrimage, and the remains of Peter's house and that Christian gathering place can still be visited in Capernaum to this day. But why Galilee? Why go back to where it all started? I think one of the main reasons is that this is where their families were. Remember that Jesus' brothers, for certain, were estranged from him. We read in Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians in chapter 15, that one of the first appearances that Jesus made after the resurrection was to his brother James. We know that James becomes a significant leader of the early church. Did Jesus return to Galilee in order to preach the gospel and to demonstrate the resurrection to his family? We know that all of his family came on board at the beginning of the book of Acts when we read about the Christians gathering for prayer. It talks about Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers, and we presume his sisters as well, had gathered together there. We also know from Paul that the wives of the apostles, of people like Peter, joined them in their travels as apostles going from place to place. So we know that they became part of the family of faith as well. The lesson for us is the gospel begins in our homes and among our families. That's our primary mission, to preach the gospels and to live the gospels, to live the life of Jesus in the midst of our family, because that's often the most difficult place to live that life. That's what Jesus did and the disciples when they first returned to Galilee before the ministry spreading out from Jerusalem. The second point I'd like to raise has to do with the guards. The idea of the guards guarding the tomb already begins at the end of chapter 7 when the chief priests and the Pharisees go to Pilate and ask Pilate to appoint guards to the tomb. They say, "Otherwise his disciples may come and steal his body and tell the people that he's been raised from the dead." This last deception will be worse than the first. Then in chapter 28 we read, "While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money by telling them, 'You're to say his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble.' So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed, and this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day." Obviously, during Matthew's time of writing the gospel and the time that Matthew's gospel was translated, this was one of the persistent explanations for the empty tomb. And Matthew's not afraid of raising this in his gospel as one of the primary objections to the empty tomb. Another very interesting part connected to this, perhaps, is right at the beginning of the Great Commission as Matthew wraps up his gospel. And he says, "Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted." Some doubted. And then Jesus came to them and said, and then we have the Great Commission. Why does Matthew end his gospel with the line, "Some doubted"? and right after the explanation of the deception that has been claimed by the chief priests with the collusion of the guards. Why end your gospel on a position of such uncertainty and doubt? I think you only do that if you yourself are certain and convinced beyond doubt of the resurrection and are willing to challenge these doubts face on, as indeed Matthew and the members of his community to whom he's writing his gospel are there for. And so we have an ending of the gospel which throws things up into some doubt, but only because of the great confidence that Matthew and his community have of the resurrection of Jesus, to which they were eyewitnesses. The other aspect, just a small thing about the guards' report. It indicates, while the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. I've long been compelled to wonder, some of the guards, what did the others do? Did the others perhaps run never to be seen again? Did they come to believe in Jesus and join the community of early believers? We don't know. A movie that's been made in recent years called Risen deals with precisely this idea. What happened to those guards? What happened to the Romans after the crucifixion? We're not done with Matthew. We're going to go back and cover some of the material that we skipped by so that we could keep in touch with Easter time. But I think we're going to slow our reading down to a chapter a day. Many of you have said it's just too much to absorb in the course of a single day. As we resume our walk through Matthew, we'll be going back to Matthew chapter 21, to Jesus coming into Jerusalem as king. There are some very interesting things that Jesus does, particularly his famous cleansing of the temple. And I know we'll find that to be real fruit for thought and study. So I'll see you tomorrow for Matthew chapter 21. When we're done Matthew, it's on to the Gospel of Mark.